She laughed too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny, and I knew in that instant my life was in trouble. You can't survive residency in a hospital like St. Mary's by letting your heart slip. Yet there I was, heart beating like a reckless child, for another woman in a white coat. Her name was Claire Matthews. Brilliant, sharp-tongued, blonde, and with a pair of blue eyes that always seemed to see through the lies patients told us. And the lies I told myself. I had spent years convincing everyone, including me, that I was untouchable. Medicine first, feelings last. But Claire shattered that defense with a smile, the kind that made my chest ache and my throat tighten. The irony was merciless. Both of us doctors, both women, both bound by an invisible contract of silence. The hospital was a place of science and scrutiny, not whispers and stolen glances. And worse, Claire was engaged to a man. The emergency room on a Monday was chaos, bleeding wounds, panicked families, the scent of antiseptic mixed with sweat and fear. It was the kind of place where love was supposed to die, smothered under trauma codes and flatlines. But instead, love was born there. Quietly, stubbornly. We were stitching up a teenager's arm together when I first noticed the tremor in Claire's hands. "You're nervous," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the suture. She shot me a glare that could kill. "I am not." Her knot slipped. I covered it with my gloved hand, steadying her fingers. That single touch sparked like static through my skin. She froze just long enough for me to feel it wasn't just me. Our eyes met above the sterile drapes. For 1 second, the boy's blood and the mother's sobs disappeared, and there was only us two doctors breaking every unspoken rule of the room. But nothing good can stay hidden forever. Hospitals are full of gossip. Nurses notice too much, orderlies whisper in break rooms. Soon people started asking why Claire and I always took cases together, why our charts were stacked side by side, why we stayed late after rounds when no one needed us. I should have walked away then. I should have told myself she wasn't mine, never could be mine. But every night I lingered in the resident lounge, waiting for her to walk in, holding 2 cups of coffee like an addict waiting for a fix. "You're insane," she said once, smiling despite herself as she accepted the coffee. "You're going to make people think things." "Let them," I muttered, not meaning to sound as raw as I did. Her smile faltered. A silence grew between us, heavy with the truth neither of us could voice. She wanted me too. Claire's fiancé, Michael, was a cardiology fellow, arrogant, perfectly handsome, the kind of man you could put on a billboard for the hospital. Everyone adored him. Everyone except me. The night I saw him kiss her in the cafeteria, I nearly choked on my sandwich. The world should not have cared, but my chest burned as if I were being cut open without anesthesia. Claire caught my gaze from across the room, her lips still shining with his kiss. For a split second she looked guilty. That was worse than anything. I tried to avoid her after that. I took different shifts, different cases, even volunteered for the nightmarish nights just to escape. But one evening near midnight, as I was leaving the OR, she cornered me in the stairwell. Her voice trembled. "Why are you avoiding me?" I laughed bitterly. "Why do you think?" She pressed her back against the cold wall, arms folded like armor, but her eyes betrayed her. "It's not that simple." "Of course it's not," I snapped. "You're engaged. You're God, Claire, you're supposed to marry him, have the perfect life," while my voice broke. For the first time, her hand reached for mine without hesitation. The stairwell was silent but for the hum of fluorescent lights and the pounding of my heart. Her touch was firm, desperate. "I don't want perfect," she whispered. "I want real." And in that moment I kissed her. It should have been wrong. It should have felt like betrayal, a dangerous mistake. But her lips were fire and forgiveness all at once, and I knew there was no undoing us. We clung to each other in that hidden stairwell like 2 drowning souls finding air. But every kiss demanded a price. Every smile across the ward, every stolen moment between surgeries, it all stacked higher. A tower built on secrecy waiting to collapse. The fear was constant. If anyone knew, it could end our careers. And worse, if Michael knew, it could destroy Claire's life. But I couldn't stop. Neither could she. The breaking point came in the ICU. A little girl with leukemia, pale and fragile, held our hands as she cried through another round of chemo. Claire was on one side of the bed, I on the other. For hours we stayed there, whispering stories, promising the girl she was stronger than any disease. When the child finally fell asleep, Claire looked across the bed at me. Her eyes were wet, her lips trembling with words she couldn't say aloud. That was when I knew we weren't just two doctors tangled in a reckless affair. We were two women who had found something worth burning for, even if it consumed us. And I also knew we couldn't keep it hidden forever. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. The city outside was loud with sirens and traffic, but my mind was louder. Every beat of my heart asked the same question. How long before this secret destroys us? Because in America, in our hospital, in our world, love between two women doctors was not just frowned upon, it was forbidden. And yet, forbidden love was the only kind I had left. The hospital became our battlefield, our sanctuary, and our prison all at once. Every hallway whispered with suspicion. Every shift change felt like an ambush. Claire and I had mastered the art of silence. The way our eyes met across crowded wards but never lingered too long. The way our hands brushed when passing scalpels but never fully touched. Yet underneath it all, the current between us grew stronger, threatening to pull us both under. It was a Wednesday when everything cracked. Claire walked into morning rounds looking pale, her hair slightly disheveled, her engagement ring absent from her finger. Michael was nowhere in sight. That should have made me happy, but instead my chest twisted with dread. She wouldn't meet my eyes, not once through the entire presentation. After rounds, I cornered her in the residence lounge. The room was empty except for the humming vending machine and the smell of burnt coffee. What happened? I asked. She bit her lip, staring at the floor. We fought. About you. The blood drained from my face. What did you? I didn't tell him everything. But he knows something is off. He said I've been distant, distracted. Her voice cracked. He asked me if I was in love with someone else. I swallowed hard. And you? I couldn't lie. The silence between us was deafening. I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to promise that we would survive this, but the reality pressed down like the ceiling itself might collapse. If Michael knew, others would know soon. And once the gossip spread, neither of us would have a future at St. Mary's. For the next week, tension shadowed every step we took. Michael started showing up unannounced during shifts, his eyes sharp as scalpels whenever he looked at me. Nurses whispered when Claire avoided his touch in public. I pretended not to notice, but my chest ached with every stolen glance, every strained silence. One night, as the ER exploded with a pileup from the freeway, Claire and I found ourselves side by side again, working like one body with two hands. Amid blood and chaos, I realized something. No matter how dangerous, no matter how impossible, I couldn't give her up. We worked best together. We were best together. Hours later, exhausted and covered in sweat, we collapsed in the supply room to catch our breath. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us, harsh and unforgiving, but Claire's face softened in the dimness. I broke off the engagement, she whispered. My heart slammed against my ribs. Claire, she shook her head. I couldn't keep lying to him. I couldn't keep lying to myself. Before I could answer, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't frantic this time, wasn't stolen or desperate. It was steady, certain, like she had finally chosen which life to live, and she had chosen me. But love, especially forbidden love, never comes without consequence. 2 days later, I was called into the program director's office. Dr. Bennett, a man carved from granite and protocol, sat across from me with folded hands. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in the room was suffocating. There have been concerns, he said slowly, about your professionalism, about your relationship with Dr. Matthews. My throat went dry. Sir, he raised a hand. I don't care what you do outside these walls. But inside this hospital, I expect focus. I expect discipline. Rumors are dangerous. They undermine trust. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I said, though my voice wavered. As I left his office, my pulse thundered in my ears. Someone had talked. Someone had seen. And though Dr. Bennett hadn't said the word relationship, I knew the message was clear. Stop now or lose everything. I wanted to tell Claire we had to end it, that it was too risky. But when I saw her that night, sitting by a patient's bed, reading softly to a child who couldn't sleep, I broke. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with such quiet devotion that the thought of giving her up felt worse than any punishment. After the child drifted off, we stepped into the hallway, empty and dim under the late-night lights. They know, I whispered. Claire's shoulders stiffened. Michael. Not just him. Dr. Bennett. Maybe more. Claire were playing with fire. She took my hand right there in the corridor, no longer caring who saw. Then let's burn. But the fire spread faster than we imagined. One evening, Michael stormed into the ER. His white coat unbuttoned, his tie hanging loose. His face was red with fury, his voice sharp enough to slice through bone. You think I wouldn't find out? He shouted, loud enough for half the staff to hear. You've been sneaking around with her? Claire froze. I stepped forward, trying to calm him. Michael, not here. He turned on me like a predator. Stay out of this. You've ruined everything. The entire ER fell silent, eyes darting between us like a live broadcast of a scandal. My hands trembled, but I stood my ground. She's not yours to own, I said quietly but firmly. Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't strike me. He wasn't that reckless, but his silence was worse than violence. He looked at Claire one last time, shaking his head in disbelief before storming out. The whispers that followed were unstoppable. For weeks, we became the subject of every hushed conversation, every side glance in the cafeteria. Some nurses smiled knowingly, supportive in their silence. Others sneered, muttering words like unprofessional and reckless. Dr. Bennett called me in again. His patience was thinner this time. This has to end, he said flatly. The hospital's reputation is on the line. Your careers are on the line. I walked out of his office with shaking hands, torn between fear and defiance. How do you end something that feels like the only real thing you've ever had? That night, Claire came to my apartment. She was soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face, her scrubs clinging to her body. Without a word, she stepped inside, dripping water on my floor. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. My chest caved. Claire, not us, she said quickly, tears spilling from her eyes. I can't do this half-life. I can't sneak around anymore. If we're going to be together, we have to be together for real. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as if she might disappear. Then we fight, I whispered into her wet hair. We fight for this. The fight wasn't easy. It meant facing colleagues who judged us, supervisors who threatened us, patients' families who sometimes looked at us with confusion or disdain. It meant sleepless nights wondering if the residency board would expel us, if hospitals would blacklist us. But it also meant mornings where I woke with Claire's head on my shoulder, her hand curled in mine. It meant laughter in the break room, even when the world outside was cruel. It meant love, real, raw, defiant love. And slowly something shifted. The whispers didn't stop, but they softened. Some colleagues began to stand by us quietly, subtly. A nurse smiled as she handed us charts side by side. Another doctor clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't let them scare you. Love's rare in this place." It wasn't acceptance, not fully. But it was hope. Hope became our shield. One evening after a brutal shift, Claire and I walked out of the hospital hand in hand. For the first time, we didn't let go when someone passed by. The city lights glowed around us, the air heavy with rain, and I realized something simple but profound. We had already survived the worst. And if love could bloom here in the silence, in the chaos, in the face of everything, we could survive anything. I looked at her, her hair catching the glow of the streetlights, her eyes tired but burning with determination. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The first time we walked into the hospital hand in hand, heads turned like we had detonated a bomb in the middle of the hallway. No one said anything outright, but the weight of their stares pressed against my skin like needles. Claire's fingers tightened around mine. She didn't flinch. She didn't let go. But after the adrenaline faded, reality set in. Being visible meant being vulnerable. Every mistake we made as doctors would now be tied to whispers about our relationship. Every patient's complaint, every supervisor's critique, every sleepless error during a shift, it would all be chalked up to distraction. And yet, we chose this. One Friday, I walked into the ER to find a group of interns laughing in the corner. Their voices low but not low enough. "Guess Matthews prefers girls in scrubs," one muttered. "At least she won't steal anyone's boyfriend now," another joked. I stopped cold, my chart trembling in my hands. Claire was across the room instructing a nurse, but I knew she heard them. Her shoulders stiffened, her voice clipped as she spoke to the patient. I wanted to scream at them, to rip into their smug little smiles. But I forced myself to breathe, to remember what was at stake. My fury wouldn't silence them, it would only prove their point. Later, when we were alone in the stairwell, I whispered, "Does it bother you?" She gave a humorless laugh. "If it didn't, I wouldn't be human. But I'd rather they hate me for the truth than love me for a lie." I kissed her then, because there were no words big enough to hold my love for her. But the hospital wasn't the only battlefield. My parents called one Sunday, their voices warm with small talk, until my mother asked, "So, are you seeing anyone? A nice young man, perhaps?" I froze. I had never told them. I had never told anyone outside the hospital. The silence stretched too long. My mother's tone sharpened. "Sweetheart." And then before I could stop myself, I said, "Her name is Claire." My father cleared his throat. My mother stuttered. "Her?" "Yes," I said, voice shaking. She's my partner. She's a doctor too. And I love her." The call ended quickly after that. No shouting, no disowning. Just silence. Silence worse than anger. When I told Claire, she cupped my face in her hands, tears brimming in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that for me." "I didn't," I said softly. "I did it for me." The weeks blurred together in a haze of 12-hour shifts, whispered insults, and rare moments of joy. We clung to each other in on-call rooms, sometimes just holding hands in the dark, reminding ourselves that love could exist in places built on suffering. But then came the lawsuit. A patient's family accused Claire of negligence after their father died during surgery. It wasn't her fault, the man's heart had been too weak, his body too broken, but grief doesn't care about truth. And gossip doesn't need facts. Suddenly, whispers became headlines. A local paper ran a story. "Resident doctor under fire amid hospital scandal." They didn't mention me by name, but the subtext was clear. Her distraction had a face, and that face was mine. Dr. Bennett summoned us both. His voice was iron. "I told you this would happen. Now one of you could lose your license. Do you understand what's at stake?" "Yes, sir," Claire said firmly. But when we left his office, her strength cracked. She collapsed against the wall, her shoulders shaking. "I can't lose this. I can't lose medicine. It's who I am." I pulled her into my arms, my own throat tight. "You won't. We'll fight this. Together." The hearing was brutal. Lawyers dissected every chart note, every decision Claire had made. The family glared from across the table, convinced she had stolen their father's last chance. When the opposing attorney suggested her personal entanglements compromised her judgment, I felt fire surge through my veins. I stood up, ignoring protocol, ignoring the gasps. "Her judgment is better than any doctor I've ever met. She stayed with that man for 16 hours straight, trying everything she could to save him. She's the reason he survived as long as he did. Don't you dare suggest her love for me makes her less of a doctor, it makes her more human." The room went silent. Claire's eyes met mine, wide with shock and gratitude, and in that instant, I knew I would burn the world to keep her safe. The board ruled in her favor. No negligence. Her record remained clean. But the battle left scars. Some colleagues congratulated her quietly. Others avoided us altogether. Trust was fragile, and respect, once cracked, doesn't heal overnight. One evening after a grueling shift, we walked out into the city. The streets were alive with Friday night laughter, music spilling from bars. For once, we weren't doctors. We were just two women in love, wandering the streets like any other couple. "Do you ever regret it?" Claire asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Choosing me. Choosing this. The whispers, the fights, the risks." I stopped walking. I turned to her, cupping her face in both hands. "I regret not kissing you sooner. I regret every second I wasted pretending I didn't want you. But you? Us? Never." Her lips trembled into a smile, and I kissed her under the glow of the streetlights, the city buzzing around us, indifferent and infinite. Months passed. The whispers faded. The stares softened. Some never accepted us, but others did. Slowly we carved out a place for ourselves, not just as doctors, not just as lovers, but as something stronger. We found laughter in exhaustion, comfort in chaos, love in the cracks of a world that tried to deny us. And in those small, stubborn victories we built a life. The hospital never stopped being hard. The world never stopped being harsh. But our love was steady, unflinching, defiant. And sometimes in the quiet of dawn, when the city was still asleep and Claire's head rested against my chest, I realized we had won. Not the world, not society, but ourselves. We were both doctors. And against all odds, love had blossomed in silence and stayed. Winter crept into the city quietly that year, dusting the hospital parking lot with pale snow, frosting the windows of the ICU where Claire and I still pulled long shifts. The chaos of the lawsuit had passed, the rumors had dulled, but the silence between us and the rest of the staff was heavy, cautious. We had survived the fire. Yes, but surviving isn't the same as healing. One evening after a 14-hour shift, Claire and I collapsed onto the couch in my apartment, still in our scrubs, shoes kicked off haphazardly. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and for a long time we said nothing. Finally she whispered, "I want to see my parents." I stiffened. "Are you sure?" "They stopped calling after I broke off the engagement," she admitted. "But I can't keep pretending I don't need them. If they hate me, if they hate us, I need to hear it to my face." I took her hand. "Then I'll go with you." Her eyes softened. "You do that?" "Of course. I'm not letting you walk into that alone." The Matthews house was a world away from the sterile walls of St. Mary's swarmwood floors, the faint smell of cinnamon, photographs of family vacations smiling from the mantel. But the warmth didn't reach Claire's parents' eyes when we stepped through the door. Her mother's voice was sharp. "So it's true." Claire lifted her chin. "Yes, it's true. I love her." Her father folded his arms. "You threw away a good man, a good future for this?" "I didn't throw it away," Claire said firmly. "I chose something better. I chose honesty. I chose love." I squeezed her hand, my own throat tight. I had prepared myself to defend her, to take their anger, but nothing could prepare me for the silence that followed, an endless, aching silence. Finally, her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand it. I don't know how to accept it. But I don't want to lose my daughter." Claire broke then, sobbing into her mother's arms, years of fear and silence pouring out all at once. Her father didn't embrace her right away, but when he finally placed a hesitant hand on her back, I knew this was the beginning of something new. Not full acceptance, not yet, but hope. Driving back that night, Claire clutched my hand so tightly it almost hurt. "They didn't slam the door," she whispered. "That's enough for me. For now." I smiled. "It's more than enough." At the hospital, things slowly shifted too. Dr. Bennett still kept his stern gaze on us, but he stopped calling us into his office. Nurses who once whispered behind our backs now greeted us with quiet respect. Even some patients noticed. One little boy, recovering from surgery, pointed at us one afternoon. "Are you two married?" he asked bluntly. Claire froze, caught off guard, but I smiled. "Not yet," I said. The boy grinned. "You should be. You look happy." Something in Claire's eyes changed at that moment, like a light switching on. Weeks later, after a brutal overnight shift, I stumbled into the lounge to find the lights dimmed, the table set with 2 paper cups of coffee, and a tiny cupcake sitting between them. A single candle flickered in the frosting. Claire stood there, her cheeks flushed, her hands trembling. "I don't have a ring yet," she said quickly. "And this isn't how people usually do it. But I don't care about usual. I care about us. Will you marry me?" For a moment I just stared at her, exhaustion and disbelief warring with joy. Then I laughed, a messy, breathless laugh that turned into tears. "Yes," I whispered, pulling her into my arms. "God, yes." We didn't marry right away. Life as residents didn't allow much space for weddings. But the promise hung between us like a soft, steady flame, keeping us warm through endless nights and endless shifts. The hospital didn't magically transform into a haven. We still faced stares, still endured the occasional cruel remark. But the difference was we weren't hiding anymore. And the freedom in that truth was worth every battle. Spring came, and with it renewal. My parents finally visited, bringing awkward smiles and tentative hugs. Claire's parents sent a card, signed with both their names. Acceptance wasn't immediate, wasn't perfect, but it was real. One Saturday, Claire and I walked through Central Park, the cherry blossoms blooming overhead. Families picnicked, couples strolled, children chased kites. Claire slipped her hand into mine, No hesitation, no fear. For the first time I realized we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. The night before our graduation from residency, we stood together on the hospital roof, watching the city lights flicker below. The place that had nearly broken us, that had forced us into silence and secrecy, had also been the place where love was born. Claire rested her head against mine. Do you think it will ever get easier? I thought about the battles still ahead, the patience we'd lose, the people who'd judge us, the world that wouldn't always understand. Then I thought about her, about every moment we had stolen and every moment still to come. No, I said softly, but I think we'll always have each other. And that's enough. She smiled, her lips brushing mine under the night sky, and I knew she believed it too. On the day of our small wedding months later, in a quiet garden with only a handful of friends and family, Claire's father walked her down the aisle. Her mother cried through the entire ceremony. My parents hugged her like their own. When we said our vows, there were no secrets, no shadows, no silence. Only love, loud, unashamed, defiant love. We were both doctors. We healed bodies, stitched wounds, fought death every day. But the greatest miracle we had ever witnessed wasn't in the operating room or the ICU. It was this, that in a world built to silence us, love found a voice. And it never stopped speaking. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.